All right, welcome back. So, in the last couple lessons, you've learned a couple of tools. Now, let's start talking about how you use them. The next thing we're going to take a look at here is the subject of perfection in marriage. In my experience, there really is no such thing as a perfect marriage, right? I don't know anyone who has one. I myself have never had one. I've never met a couple who felt they had a perfect marriage. However, there is such a thing as a happy marriage. And certainly there are marriages that seem to get along pretty well most of the time and have passion and fulfillment and intimacy and good communication between them the majority of the time. The world we live in is not perfect, and so unfortunately that exterior environment tends to sometimes intrude onto our own happiness and perfection. However, there is such a thing as an ideal marriage. Ideal is very different than perfect. And really, when it comes down to building an ideal marriage, one that's the way you want it to be, the first thing we have to look at, and forgive me if this sounds ridiculous, but do you actually have any role models for a good marriage? If your parents were divorced, or if they were always fighting and they're never getting along, or if you've only ever seen marriages in movies like Disney movies, you probably are lacking a good picture of behind the scenes, right? What's really going on inside a happy marriage? So, if you don't have a good role model, then what I want to do is an exercise with you in this lesson to really dive into what a marriage should look like if it's happy and successful. And if you do have good role models, I encourage you to go reach out to them and ask them, how do they handle disagreements? How do they handle choices they have to make as a couple? Who wears what roles in the relationship? And really ask them to get vulnerable and honest with you about their relationship so that you can see that it's not a perfect marriage, but it is an ideal one and what makes it ideal. Now, let's dive into this exercise a bit. How do we quantify and qualify a good marriage? In other words, what amount of happiness and what quality of communication, quality of intimacy, quality of passion or sexual activity needs to be present for you to have a good marriage? Right? Here's some examples of things you can use to quantify and qualify marriage. Joy and laughter, right? How often it makes you laugh or want to smile. Sexual activity, right? That's definitely a good part of a healthy relationship. And dating or surprising each other or spending quality time together. These are good ways that we can quantify and qualify a good marriage, right? But let's take this even deeper, because an ideal marriage in an ideal world would be a description of your relationship, the way you want it to be. How does it look? How does it feel? What does an ideal day look like? What do you want your life to be today? What do you want it to be tomorrow and next year and 3 years and 10 years and 5 decades from now? The reason why this is important to have as a written description you can refer back to again and again is because your ideal marriage description is like a recipe, okay? When things start to go wrong in the marriage, we want to have that description that we can pull out and actually analyze for ourselves, either together or separately, and see, oh, that's what's missing. That's what's fallen out, or that's what we forgot to work on, and really have a recipe or a map towards a happier day. All right. So, this is what we're going to do in this lesson. We're going to really map this out together. What should your ideal marriage look like? Now, one thing to recognize is there, unfortunately, unlike the definition of marriage itself, there is not one ideal marriage I can just script for you and give to you, because love is not cookie cutter, right? And there is no mold you can put your relationship into. You are completely unique as a couple, and someone else's description of an ideal marriage may not suit you and your partner. So it really is something you have to work out for yourselves. But here's some guidelines to help you do it. Number one, that why that you mapped out in lesson one, use that to describe the purpose of your marriage. Really, the perfect description of an ideal marriage would be a demonstration of its purpose. What is the purpose of your marriage? Here's an example, a parenting partnership where we both make enough money and have enough time to raise 4 healthy, happy kids in a good, happy, safe environment, right? Or maybe your relationship has nothing to do with having children and you really just are both very career motivated, and your marriage and your purpose for your marriage might be to partner together and support each other and love each other in direction of achieving our big, hairy, audacious goals and ambitions in life, right? That might be a completely different marriage, and it would look differently, and it would act, the couple would act very differently, but they would still be achieving happiness in their own way. Now, there's another ingredient to an ideal marriage, and that is time. We have to make sure that both couples or both people in the couple are thinking with how long this relationship should last. Like, if your total ideal marriage description has to do with your kids, then what are you going to do once they're gone, right? Remember Bethany from our last example. They went quickly into marriage autopilot the moment their kids were out of the house. So we have to focus on not just now and today, but what do we want our marriage to look like tomorrow? And then lastly, use this ideal marriage description as a recipe for happiness. When you see the bad indicators that we mapped out in the previous lesson, make sure you pull out that ideal marriage description and use it to steer you both back onto the path towards happiness. So let's take action. I want you to map out your perfect, your ideal day, your ideal relationship, and really ask yourself, what is the purpose of our marriage? What do I want to achieve together that we could not achieve apart? And use that to work out what the perfect scenario of your relationship is.